Morning, what I'd like for us to talk about is we're going to retouch an idea that we had presented in a lesson not long ago. If you remember, we told the story of someone who came into the congregation and they told everybody in there, they said, I need prayer for one of my friends. And they said he was a young man, early 30s, and they said he died over the weekend. And everybody said, well, we're sorry to hear that. We'll certainly be praying for his family that he left behind. And they said, well, the very tragic thing about it is this man was a married man and he died in his girlfriend's bed. And at that point, everybody says, well, we'll pray for the family, but there's absolutely nothing we can be praying for him at this point. And the individual, when they heard that story, they just, a preacher heard it and he said, I'm not crazy. He said, I'm not naive. He said, I know there will be people in this congregation, he said, they might do that. And he said, but I just can't for the life of me think what that person is going through now. And the way that he expressed it, and I had never thought of it actually being that way, was, he said, what if that's just the first talking point that you share with God? However the transition is from dying physically and going into the next realm, as we look at this and we say, if it's a split second, if it's a process, if you see God right away or you have to be led to Him, however it's going to work, but you sit down face to face with the Lord and He says, you died in your girlfriend's bed. Let's talk about that. How awful. And we all know what it is like having you try, and you say, people say it when they really are, right? They say, I'm not making excuses, but, and we start trying to explain things as if it even makes sense. Somebody says, well, marriage was on the rocks anyways and this happened. That's not an excuse to go out and do that. The thing to do is we sit down and say, let's fix this, rather than I just go out. And that's what we want to talk about this morning, is look at all the different, we're talking about life. And the Bible says that the average lifespan is going to be 70 years. And it even says the only way people make it to 80 and beyond, he says, if by reason of strength they are a healthy and a strong individual, if they can do it. So what we're going to talk about is all the things that you and I can actually get ourselves into in a 70-year window. And just how much it touches these little actions and these choices that we make. And we ask the question, if the points in our life that we're going to look at this morning, we say, that's going to be our talking point with God. We see Him and He's going to say, let's talk about that. And the first point that we're going to make this morning, and a lot of these are going to be this way, you're going to look at them, and the sad thing about life, we're here, we have the truth, and y'all, God's merciful, people are not. We need to be more merciful and generous with each other. The things that we're going to look at this morning, by and large, as we talked about in the Bible class, the adolescent years, you're starting to get some knowledge. You might be building up some skill, but that's the point in your life where individuals, you're laying the foundation for the rest of your life. And it's like people say, don't blow it. And you're saying, I'm trying not to, but I just don't know, right? And this is the first point we're going to look at this morning. When you look at the choices people make, and we're going to put a Bible example with it, and we're going to make some points and realize this is one of the biggest, crucial things that's happening in the world, and the way that it can turn an individual, the way that it can propel their life. There are people, we look at these situations where their conversation, their one-on-one with the Lord is going to look something like this. Is God actually going to say, I know that your life would have been so much different if you had married somebody that had helped you spiritually. However, you didn't. Now let's talk about that. Upon finding out, and I'm saying there are a lot of people in the world who will turn their marriage around. A lot of people, they do it. And it takes work. But when you see conversation points like this and somebody says, it could have been a lot better. Isn't that hard enough in its own statement? When you're realizing, however long that we get to live, you're recognizing the point when the Lord says to you, you could have had a better lifetime. What happened? You made a choice to live it with somebody who actually wasn't helping you, who was actually fighting against you. Like if you got to see a slideshow and you basically saw, this is what it could have been. Somebody could say, I can't even take that. I can't even take thinking about that. That should just be enough. That I spent my life not to the fullest capacity that I could have because of this one choice. Do you know this is in the Bible? This type of teaching is in the Bible. Remember we did our study on Kings and Chronicles? There are two people that get documented as the worst kings in Israel. And it's pretty unfair that gets said about them. Ahab and Manasseh. They did some bad stuff. But I can't say that they're any worse than anybody else. And in fact, when I look at Ahab, he's not that bad in and of himself. Everybody remember who Ahab married? I was reading, this is not where I got it, but I thumbed through somebody's sermon book once. How would you like to come in on a Sunday morning and the title says, One Woman That Ruined a Nation? Boy, that is heavy. You put everything on that one woman, it's Jezebel. When you look at Ahab, this is the first bit of information that you get. In the 38th year of Asa, king of Judah, began the son of Ahab, the son of Omri, to reign over Israel. And Ahab, the son of Omri, reigned over Israel and Samaria 22 years. And Ahab, the son of Omri, did evil in the sight of the Lord above all that were before him. Now, what was he doing? We can give some reasoning to this. We can at least empathize with it. When it says he did evil, like everybody else was before him, he kept the idols that Jeroboam made. Now, it's an excuse, and it's not a reasonable one. He could say, that's all I knew, right? My daddy and my granddaddy, they all worshiped these idols in Dan and Bethel. That's all I knew. But look what else happens. In your mind, and I'm saying some people disagree with this, do you think which is worse, having one idol or two idols? Somebody may say, what difference does it make? You're already worshiping an idol. I think it's bad if you start increasing your idols either way, right? Because you're still getting away from the idea of there's one God. Look at this. It came to pass, as if it had been a light thing for him to walk in the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, that he took to wife Jezebel, the daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Zidonians, and he went and served Baal and worshipped him. He was not going to do this if he had not married this woman. Now, you look at it, there are a lot of names in the Bible, and most of them, like if you see Jehoiada, things like that, those have the way that their names are made and the meanings behind them, they almost always attach somehow their name to God. Their false idol is in their name, Ethbaal. They're naming themselves after their false god. So honestly, it's like, why? Y'all remember? I don't remember all their names. You know, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who played for the Lakers, that wasn't his real name. He changed his name. Cassius Clay, he changed his name. Muhammad Ali. So why would I do this? Why would I marry a woman who had like the last name Jenkins, and then she just starts calling herself Muhammad? I can already tell that's not going to work, right? Because who she's going to be following? Allah. Dude, why did you marry this woman who is actually named after a false god? And as soon as they get hooked up, what does he do? She says, honey, I want you to bring that over here. All right, let's do it. He built this altar and this idol just for her, and he reared up the altar for Baal in the house of Baal, which he had built in Samaria. He wasn't going to do this without her. And you say, how do you know that? 1 Kings 11, that's the only reason King Solomon did it. You don't just go hunting after these new idols if there's not some type of prevailing force behind it. And in these instances, it was their wives. Now look at this. King Ahab gets a lot of credit for stuff that he did not do. 1 Kings 19, this is after Elijah had had a demonstration with the false prophets of Baal. Remember, they set up their altars, and he said, whoever gets fire from heaven is the real prophet of God. And all those false prophets, over 400 of them, were killed. And Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done, with how he had slain all the prophets with the sword. Then Jezebel sent a messenger unto Elijah, saying, so let the gods do to me, and more also, if I make not thy life as the life of one of them by tomorrow about this time. Jezebel is the individual who actually persecuted all of God's people. Ahab didn't make those decrees. His wife did. And when you go further in the book, remember Naboth's vineyard? Ahab goes out. He sees Naboth's vineyard. He says, it's a good piece of land. I'd like to get it. Naboth says, well, it's not for sale. What does Ahab do? Verse number 4, Ahab came into the house heavy and displeased because of the word which Naboth the Jezreelite had spoken unto him. For he had said, I will not give thee the inheritance of my fathers. And he laid him down upon his bed, turned away his face, and would not eat bread. At the most, you just say Ahab is pouting. And you say, well, that's distasteful. Sure, it beats murder, which is what his wife does. Jezebel, his wife, came to him and said, why is thy spirit so sad? Thou eatest no bread. And he said unto her, because I spake unto Naboth the Jezreelite, and said unto him, give me the vineyard for money, or else, if it please thee, I will give thee another vineyard for it. And he answered, I will not give thee my vineyard. And Jezebel's wife said unto him, dost thou now govern the kingdom of Israel? Arise and eat bread, and let thy heart be merry. I will give thee the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite. So she wrote letters in Ahab's name, and sealed them with the seal, and sent letters to the elders and to the nobles that were in the city, dwelling with Naboth. And she wrote in the letter, saying, proclaim a fast, and set Naboth on high among the people, and set 2 men, sons of Belial, before him to bear witness against him, saying, thou didst blaspheme God and the king, and then carry him out and stone him, that he may die. Ahab doesn't do these things. Majority of the bad things that you see happening in Ahab's lifetime are done by his wife. Now, and I'm saying, let's give him some credit. Later in the book of 1 Kings, you're going to see Ahab humble himself. Ahab had good qualities. But just think about what he could have been if he hadn't married that particular woman. Then you start looking at these scriptures like that, and you say, what can I do about it now? Proverbs 12:4, and I want to make this point. It says, a virtuous woman is a crown to her husband, but she maketh ashamed. But she that maketh ashamed is as rottenness in his bones. I'm not picking on women. All these passages and this concept that we're doing applies to men. And we might be saying this now. Look, we say, what can I do about it now? If you are somebody in this situation, warn young people. You would warn anybody. If you just knew everybody gets sick by doing this rotten in the bone, don't do that. Whatever you do, don't do that. People will say to you that it won't work out that way. People will say we got a vaccine for it. No, they don't. Don't do it. The aged women likewise, that they may be in behavior as becometh holiness, not false accusers, not given to much wine, not teachers of good things, that they may teach the young women to be sober, to love their husbands, to love their children, to be discreet, chaste, keepers at home, good, obedient to their own husbands, that the word of God be not blasphemed. Big discussion point for me growing up. All those times that we would ride in the pickup with Dad, at some point it would come up and he would say, you're not going to marry a non-Christian, are you? Don't do that. Please don't do that. Now somebody would say, hey, I did it. Help somebody else to avoid it. I had no plans to do it. When I met my wife, her dad is not a Christian. She had already said in her mind, I will not marry a non-Christian like my dad. She loves her dad, but she recognizes non-Christian behaviors, and she did not want to be hooked up with it for the rest of your life. That's what I'm telling these people. It's kind of a joke. Some young friends of mine got married, and I said, y'all stuck now. Aren't they? Then why, if you know that you are, why would you pick someone who doesn't value the values that you have? But here's our point. You saw Ahab. We see ourselves, we see these kids. What do we tell kids to look for when they're getting married? There is so much more than having, someone says, a good job. What's a good job? Does it feed them? Is your daughter going to go hungry? Is she going to be cold in the winter? What are we looking for, honestly? There's a movie and this man says to this other man who's poorer than he is, but the only way this other guy's got money is he's a crook. He says, if I had a wife like yours, I'd put her in pretty dresses. There is so much more to life. I mean, how would you feel if you had a husband who pays you no attention, who gives you no respect, but he gives you all kinds of dresses? People be saying, I'd burn them dresses. We got to be telling young people about this. And we need to be telling them the things what the Proverbs chapter 5 says. It's good to get married young. Got too many people in the world today saying, oh, no, you need to wait around. You know what happens? They wait around and they fool around. You know why? Because 1 Corinthians 7 says it is hard to contain yourself. People are giving young people bad advice. Don't marry a non-Christian. And it is a good idea to marry young. And the Bible says that. So what can we do about it? Now this is just one point. And we say about, someone says, I did marry young. And I got myself into a mess. Then help the next generation. It may not be marriage. We may actually approach God to where He says, man, this is what your life could have been if you hadn't taken that job. That big salary, that big increase that you were going to get, and the benefits, and the bonus, and the extra vacation time, all that sure looked good. And you know what a lot of people say? They say, if I made more money, I'd give more. You know what happens a lot of times? They make more money and their contribution stays the same. It's just something people say. People say, if I won the lottery, I'd give more. Well, why don't you try to increase your giving with where you already are now? That's what would make sense, because you're probably not going to win the lottery, and you're wasting money while you're playing the lottery. He said, your life could have been so much different if you hadn't taken that job, but you did. Now let's look at your life. Again, we say, if you have lived 70 years and beyond, and God says, we're fixing to watch a movie, and this is where you could have been. I'd be 10 minutes in the movie, say, can we cut this off? Nobody wants to think that way, but y'all, we do this to ourselves, don't we? I'm saying, you be honest. Do you like thinking about this? No. This is awful stuff to sit here and contemplate, what could my life be? And we start thinking about the ways that we get ourselves into this. Now, we already looked in our Bible class about all the times Jesus mentions. In Matthew chapter 5, He says, woe unto those who are rich. When you get to Matthew chapter 16, He says, what does a man gain? What does a man profit if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? In Matthew chapter 19, He tells the rich young ruler, go and sell all that you have. And then when the man can't do it, He says, hardly will the rich man enter into heaven. And we think, with all that teaching from Jesus, that it's not a big deal which job we take. And think about this. If you take particular jobs, you are signing up for some hardship, and you are signing up to dedicate yourself to the right position. I was reading a book the other day. It's a biography, and this man was arrested under false pretense. When you arrest somebody under false pretense, what's the worst thing you can do? Drop the charges with no explanation? That shows you had no case and you know it. They arrest this man under false pretense. They drop the charges the next day. The man who was arrested goes to visit a lawyer and he says, what can I do? What are my rights? And the guy said, man, you got a good case to take these people to court. And he said, okay then. And then the lawyer says, but you can't use me. Why? He said, I got to live amongst these people. Dude, you signed up to do this job. You signed up to be the voice of people who can't do it themselves. And now you're going to tell me I can't do it? That's unacceptable. You think someone else is going to come along and say, hey, I need your help. How about you do a good job getting this man some justice? And other people say, he got them justice. I'd like to get some. But people sign up for these jobs and they don't fulfill them. They put money in front of the cause, and then they do all that at the cost of spiritual growth. Acts 19. Look at this. You may have a good job. You may just have wrong customers. A certain man named Demetrius, a silversmith, which made silver shrines for Diana, brought no small gain unto the craftsmen. They were making a bunch of money. Whom he called together with the workmen of like occupation and said, Sirs, you know that by this craft we have our wealth. They are actually able to say, other silversmiths in town, there's enough business to go around. People love this idol. There's enough for all of us. We have our wealth. Moreover, you see and hear that none alone at Ephesus, but almost throughout all Asia, this Paul hath persuaded and turned away much people, saying that they be no gods which are made with hands. So that not only this, our craft is in danger to be set at naught, but also that the temple of the great goddess Diana should be despised, and her magnificence should be destroyed, whom all Asia, the world, worshipeth. And when they heard these things, they were full of wrath, and cried out, saying, Great is Diana of the Ephesians. Do you know what a Christian cannot do? A Christian can have a convenience store. A Christian cannot have a convenience store where he sells tobacco, alcohol, and lotto tickets. Mom and Dad had a little gas station out near their house in Cascade. And when I lived at home, I would walk down there, I'd ride a bike down there. He should have known I was underage, but he told me one day, he said, it's coming. And I said, what? He said, I'm going to have beer and lottery in here pretty soon. And I said, I don't care nothing about that. You can't operate that and be a Christian at the same time any more than this man could actually be making idols for other people out of silver. Are there other ways you can put that to use? Sure. He could have done all kinds of stuff being a silversmith. But you think about this. He recognizes the problem, doesn't he? And he full well knows what Paul is teaching. Man, he teaches this everywhere. There are no gods made with hands. Why didn't he just accept it? Why didn't he just obey the truth? Now let's think about this back on that convenience store idea. You know, there are a lot of places, some of them still in America, where they are a dry county. Right? And there are some places where they actually have voted. We don't want lottery here. Very, very few. But they put it up to a vote. Do you know there actually is a member of the church somewhere, and I believe this man was actually an elder. He ran a convenience store, and he started selling beer, cigarettes, and lotto tickets. And when somebody questioned him about it, he said, somebody in town is going to do it. I might as well get the money. What in the world? We could make that application to everything. Somebody's going to do it. Might as well be me. If there's money to be had, I might as well be getting it. So when it comes down to a vote, and we want to keep the county dry, what's that elder going to vote on? Bring it in. It's going to hurt his money if he doesn't. We want to keep lotto out. What's that dude going to vote on? Bring it in. Why? Because if not, that's just a cut out of his paycheck. We should be thinking about work as we already read in 1 Timothy 6, verse number 6 through 8. We brought nothing in this world and we can't take anything out. If that's the case, why can't we make it up in our minds that we say, we get what we need? And if we had that aspect, think about, could we actually free up our time? There are some people in the world who they say, hey, you got some extra overtime? Give it to me. What if I lived in such a way that I actually live below my means? That I get excess in my paycheck because I have made myself not have all these bills. Do I get to work less? Is it possible I could work less? With my free time, can I do more Bible study? Personally, at home? If I have more availability, can I make it to Bible class on Sunday and Wednesday? If I'm working less, if I'm not pressing myself so hard, do I actually have the energy to stay up and watch what does the Bible say at 9 o'clock? A couple Wednesday nights ago, we had a lady call in and she said, who are you? And you know what I'm thinking? She's fixing to chew me out. I said, I'm Caleb. Where are you coming from? We've been here. Long pause, and she says, I like you. And then I said, well, where you been? We've been on the show for 20 years. She said, I'm usually in bed about this time. 9 o'clock? I reckon people go to bed at 9 o'clock. Man, I had a friend who was already retired, and I asked him, his name's Dan. I said, Dan, you stay up that late? He said, Caleb, how do you think I am? I stay up till 11. I wake back up at 5. Okay, hey, if you can do it. Think about this, y'all. There are people out there who they're thinking the way I'm thinking. And you know what they're doing it for? They say, I want to retire by the time that I'm 30. And that sounds outlandish, but they do it. You know how they do it? They don't buy smartphones. They don't get the huge package. They don't have multiple streaming platforms. They don't have cable. They're just saying, hey, we've got each other. God has provided with us with all manner of things to do. We're trying to not work ourselves so hard. Now look what Jesus said. Labor not for the meat which perisheth, but for the meat which endureth unto everlasting life, which the Son of Man shall give unto you, for him hath God the Father sealed. Now here's the point that people usually miss it when they talk about worship service. If you have a job that does not allow you to be at worship every Sunday, and somebody comes up and says, don't you know you're forsaking the assembly? You know it and I know it. They know it. Everybody knows what it is. That's not the point we should be making with them. What does he say we should be laboring for? What's the meat? It's the truth. You don't labor for the meat that perishes. You labor for the meat that endures into everlasting life. Now let's talk about this. You stop eating, what are you going to look like? You're malnourished. You know, I didn't get looking like that overnight. Right? I didn't, boom, drop 30 pounds. And that's your spiritual life. You're not going to miss one Sunday and just, oh, I can't make it. You're going to miss a Sunday and you're going to say, I can do this. You know, the Bible says, resist the devil and he'll flee from you. I can do this and I can avoid sin. No, you can't. You know why I know that? Because people who come on a very regular basis, they're faithful in their membership, they can't avoid sin. You are not going to be able to maintain the spiritual lifestyle by just picking up crumbs here and there. You have got to be making big, portioned spiritual meals. Reading on your own. Reading on your own. Listening to it in the car. Bumping up our prayer life. All these different things. You know, and the opposite of this, I got a high metabolism. So when I was in school and I wanted to try to get big, you know what I had to do? When I woke up, I had to drink a protein shake. I had to eat breakfast on top of that. When I ate lunch, I drank another protein shake after that. Then I'd go to the gym, I'd drink another protein shake. Then I'd eat dinner. And a lot of times I'd have 2 dinners. And then before I went to bed, I'd have a protein shake. You say, why would you do that? I was tired of being a rail. Trying to put some meat on me. So what I do, I got excessive. Now somebody says, do you want to be spiritually strong? Yes, I do. Do you want to put in the work? Not really. Doesn't work that way. And individuals who slip out of services and they say, well, it's just one Sunday. You know what that will turn into? It'll turn into, it's just 3 Sundays. And it'll turn into what we saw with one of our brethren who we had to withdraw from, 5 Sundays. I asked him, when we finally saw him again, I said, you know, you missed 5 Sundays. Do you have a limit? He said, well, I already know 5 is bad. And we said, what are you going to do about it? He said, what can I do about it? You can get another job. You are not going to die. And somebody might say, Caleb, that is just unrealistic for you to say that. Me and Johnny lose support left and right. Right now, we're taking on, look at what these people call themselves. We have a direct quote from his mouth, face to face, where J. Lockhart said, Freed-Hardeman University is the last, how do you want to say, bastion of soundness. He says, we're the last stronghold of soundness. Don't you know there are people who are going to be contacting our supporters saying, what y'all fooling with them for? They would like to cut our support. I know what it's like. So when I say to individuals, you're missing 5 Sundays, you need to get a different job. We have people that we have to contact them because they won't be faithful, and we have to say, we're going to drop you as a supporter. We can't, in good conscience, continue to take your support if you're not going to uphold doctrine. That's the same thing. You go into your boss and say, I will do this on the job. I can't do that. I won't do that. I know what you're going through. We look at, why have Demetrius in the Bible in Acts 19 if we're not going to apply it? If we're not going to say, hey, you are letting your job take you away from God. Remember, that's our lesson. God said, man, you could have been this. in the church if you hadn't taken that job. And here's the thing. You take a job when you're young, and what do? You got a goal. Retirement. So at some point, it gets harder and harder to leave that job. I got so much time put in here, and I can't move my seniority over here. And God is sitting there saying, boy, if you had, man, if you had made that switch, it could have been miles difference. Huge! But you stuck with it. Now you sit there and you think about that, and I'm thinking about that, and we just say, that is awful. And I talk about this all the time. Your contribution to mankind, my contribution, right? We could be leaving a big stamp behind us to make this place a better place, but instead, what do? People say, I put my nose to the grind. Man, you put your whole face in that grind, and you did it just for money that you can't take with you. And on top of that, when you leave it behind, what do people usually do? Most of the people who actually have inheritances, majority of them who get an inheritance, they squander it. When I was taking classes over at PH, that's what they all said. Everybody that was in the financial department and the teachers, they said most people who come in and they don't need any help from the school or from the state, and they come in like on this huge ride, he said most of that is gone by the time they're out of school, and he said it wouldn't have to be. They don't know how to do it. So you're working hard to get all your money, and you're leaving it to somebody who's just going to do whatever with it. Malnourishment doesn't happen overnight. When you have a job that lets you be away from services, you are slowly declining. Look at this. Are we recognizing all these are young people problems? Right? I mean, we're mixed age groups here. But these are the things where you basically you're telling young people, hey, man, be smart here, because this is your life's foundation. And then you've already lived life, and you look backward and say, what could I have done? Right? People tell you, they try to warn you, you won't hear them. And you look back and say, boy, I wish I had. But those wishes don't change anything. And we're talking about how God's going to talk with us. Things would have been so much different for you if you had not gone to that school. But you did. So let's talk about that. You know what that feels like, to just sit there and be lectured. You could have done this. I know. And you should have done that. Boy, I know it. And then look at what you did to this other person. And you're just seeing all these points and how you drifted away from God. And the reason I put this here, I'm all for being open-minded. I'm for hearing opposing ideas. But when we reach the point that your opposing idea is actually becoming contradictory to what is truth, truth doesn't just have to mean the Bible. There are truths that are not in the Bible, just like, is it the truth that we all gathered here today at 11 a.m.? Somebody comes along and says, no, it was 5 a.m. What evidence is there for that? See what I'm saying? I'm for anything like that. But if your ideas start actually having problems, it's not the truth. Most young people go into school and they don't have it made up in their mind to question everything. They think they're in the highest place of learning, and they think these are the highest education, highest degrees of education held by people, and they just take everything in. And you live your life and you set your foundation, and 50 years later you say, I didn't know anything back then. They obviously knew more than I did. What could I have done about it? What can you do about it? All these things are very, very hard, and it goes both ways. Proverbs 22:6 says, train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he's old, he will not depart from it. You know, that works for people who teach error, right? Because when we teach a child the truth from their childhood, what do they at least get to say? They at least get to say, it's familiar, it's what we know. But when you teach somebody error from their childhood, more than likely they're going to stick with it. Why? It's familiar. It's what all my family members did. And then they say this, I don't see the harm in it. I talked with a lady yesterday in Walmart. She watches the TV program, and she was seeing some problems with her apostolic denomination. And I said, you've got to get out of that church. And she's talking about healing. She's got health problems. She's not healed. She starts talking about speaking in tongues. I said, y'all got a translator? And she said, no. I said, you shouldn't be speaking in tongues even if you could. I said, you got to get out of that church. She said, Caleb, I've been there my whole life. And I said, Mormons been Mormon their whole life. Muslims been Muslim their whole lives. Do they got to change? She said, yes, they do. I said, do you have to change? It's familiar to her. So when we look at this and we see people and we just say, man, if they could have just gotten a different start. But they did. Matthew 15, had in our Bible class, the traditions of men. It is tough breaking traditions. And we look at all these points, and you might be looking this morning, and I'm saying, I don't think that I didn't think it too as we put this information together. That is exactly how life works. But here is the thing. We can decide to change at any moment. This business about, nah, I'm in too deep, is not a reality. You can come out, and we're not saying it won't take some climbing, but think about it. We might be able to pitch you a rope, something to help you get out of that hole. Look at this. This is what Jesus says. Not everyone that says unto me, Lord, Lord, shall enter the kingdom of heaven, but he that doeth the will of my Father which is in heaven. Many will say to me in that day, Lord, have we not prophesied in thy name, and in thy name cast out devils, and in thy name done many wonderful works? Then will I profess unto them, I never knew you. Depart from me, ye that work iniquity. And that word is anamos. And it is the idea of where we get enemy. And when you start looking at the very basic definition is lawless, fugitive, outlaw. Who do you imagine up when you hear those terms? Outlaw, fugitive. Everybody thinks about that dude. Big, burly, in jail. Who knows what he did? That is not what God is looking at. God sees individuals, just like we studied this morning. When it says work iniquity, it's not the idea of you do a sin over here, you do a sin over there. It is the individuals who actually lay out a life plan that takes them away from God. You did not have to go to that particular school. You did not have to get that much money to work that hard to buy that much stuff. But we lay out this plan. And you know, this is how it gets sold to us. I saw a picture of a little kid the other day in front of a very, very nice car. And it had a quote that said, Daddy always said, dream big. Why not tell your kids go to heaven? That's where the dream is. You drive down, I can't even think about which ones in particular I would talk trash about, but roads in Danville, you know what? Whoever's driving a Rolls Royce in town is hitting the same potholes you are. And they're griping about, God, my Rolls Royce ain't hitting the pothole. Hey, I don't want my Toyota hitting that pothole. They're going the same speed I am. And they said, Daddy said, have dreams. Dream big. Work, that idea, dream big, is nothing but you laying out a plan that gets you away from God. I want to be able to do this, though. I want to be able to do... At what cost? Recently, Ariel and I, we bought a sofa, used, at a huge fraction of the cost. And when we went into these people's house, it was a huge house. It's listed right now for $300,000. It's just her husband, a little toddler, and a baby on the way. Got this huge house. And Ariel says, why are y'all moving? And she said, we just need a bigger place. That place is massive, and you just need a bigger place. You walk into people's homes, and they just got that empty room they don't do nothing with, and they say, we need a bigger place. They had one of them rooms. You just walk in. Someone will walk in and say, this is my bedroom, man, and you don't do nothing with it. We showed up at her house. Everybody was wanting that couch. We showed up at their house super early. They were having an open house at 8. We got there at 7. This woman comes out the front door looking like a mess, and she says, I did not expect anybody to be out here. She said, y'all are early. She said, I didn't get home but a while ago. I said, what's a while ago? She said, about 2 a.m. What's she doing at 2 a.m.? She said, I'm a bartender. When we got in there and we started looking around, I said to Ariel, she is making him sell this house. And she is making him buy a bigger house. And I said, this marriage is not going to last. Y'all, we do this to ourselves. Sometimes men do it, sometimes women do it. Sometimes a woman will press a man beyond his ability. I want this, I want that. And sometimes the man does it the same. He just spends all his time and stuff, and she says, I wish he'd pay attention to me. Those are life plans. And they just absolutely go against the Bible. And that's why we say we're doing it to ourselves. You might look at it and say, that's just really hard, though. That I make one mistake when I'm a youth. It does turn out to be my life, and then God says, you could have been this, but now you're not. And really, what is the end result we're talking here? You're going to hell. Have you noticed something in all these depictions? All these illustrations? I hope somebody did. There was something that we, in all these illustrations, there's something we didn't talk about. Now, you sit here with me and you think for a second. I'm not about to detract from what we just talked about. You can make one decision and we can mess ourselves up. Anytime you start talking about grace, there's going to be somebody in the audience that says, oh, you're recommending lawlessness? No. Paul says in Romans 7, verse number 16, if I then do that which I would not, look what he says, I consent that the law is good. Why do you want to find the right person and stay married for the rest of your life? That would be good. Why do you want to actually just take care of yourselves and not be so excessive? It frees up my time. It gives me less things to worry about. You don't have as much. You don't have to worry about stuff being foreclosed on or things being repossessed, what have you. God's commandments are there to protect us. They're not there just to weigh us down. But can you imagine going through all those illustrations that we did, that God would never bring up the blood of Christ? You don't think that in any of those illustrations where he says, your life could have been this, but you married the wrong person. And he say, I'm sorry about that. Sorry it worked out that way. Why can we not think about God that way? You think that God takes pleasure in our hardship? You spent 70 years of your life when you could have had it this way. I hate that point. Why can he not say that? Why can we not take all the illustrations that we had this morning, recognize that we don't want to do those things because it's harmful to ourselves, but then also understand that those are problems that young people deal with, and they do set themselves up for the rest of their life? Why couldn't God say, if you hadn't gone to that school, things would have been different? But then he say, but I see that you're covered in the blood. Romans 3, 24 through 27, being justified freely by his grace through the redemption that is in Christ Jesus, whom God hath set forth to be a propitiation through faith in his blood, to declare his righteousness for the remission of sins that are past through the forbearance of God, to declare, I say, at this time his righteousness, that he might be the justifier of him which believeth in Jesus. Now, what does this say? If he's having to justify somebody else, that means you couldn't do it. We've got to get this idea out of our minds that we're going to live a 70-year life filled and riddled with mistakes. And we're going to get to God and he's going to say, give me about an hour and let me rub it in. He's looking for blood. And that's not the way people say he's out for blood. He's looking to see if these individuals had faith while they were in these circumstances. The justifier of them which believe in Jesus. Where is boasting then? It is excluded. By what law? Of works? Nay, but by the law of faith. So are there going to be people that are going to have their moment with God where he's going to say, you could have had a different life if you hadn't taken that job? but I see that you're covered in the blood. There's not going to be some dude over there saying, I didn't take that job, buddy. That's not what this is discussing. And someone says, well, Caleb, now it sounds like you're going back on your points. Should we get a job where we can miss 5 Sundays in a row and just wait for the blood to take care of us? You do it and see how you turn out. You won't be able to help anybody. You won't be able to help yourself. Anything that's really good in your life, you won't be able to preserve it. The law is there to protect us. And the blood of Christ is there to take care of us when we just simply fall short. Here's our closing point this morning. He says, purge out therefore the old leaven, that ye may be a new lump, as ye are unleavened. For even Christ, our Passover, is sacrificed for us. This verse means nothing if we don't go back to Exodus 12. Look what Exodus 12 teaches us. This is when they were in Egypt. These are God's people. It says, thus shall you eat it, with your loins girded, your shoes on your feet, your staff in your hand, and ye shall eat it in haste. It is the Lord's Passover. For I will pass through the land of Egypt this night, and will smite all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. I am the Lord. And the blood shall be to you for a token upon the houses where ye are. And when I see the blood, I'll pass over you. And the plague shall not be upon you to destroy you when I smite the land of Egypt. Now look at this. Christ is our Passover. And in the actual Passover in Exodus chapter 12, what was God looking for? He just said, is there blood? And if there is, you're not going to be smoked. Now, why can I not have confidence that when I leave this world, the Lord is going to say, I see the blood? Can everybody see this little clip art? Exodus 12. Blood on the doorposts. When that night happened, and these people who believed God, and they just put some blood on their doorposts. Look at this. The Lord did not begin to check who inside the house was worthy. He checked for the blood on the doorposts. None of us is worthy. Only the blood of Jesus can cover you. Now, do you believe that? Exodus 12, in one night, do you think that there became this secret stipulation? God said, put the blood on the doorposts, you'll be covered. And then the people on the inside of the house started going through a checklist. Have we done this? Did you do that? You bringing that in here with us? It's just blood on the doorpost. Now, if that's how the Passover worked in Exodus chapter 12, why can't that be how our Passover, 1 Corinthians 5, how the process works? I said earlier, it's like you're going to watch a 2-hour movie with the Lord. There are so many things that we have done in our lives that could be brought up that God could say, look at that. What were you thinking? Look what happened to all these other people that were standing by. And I'm saying, I can remember stuff that I said. I don't know how I got that. When I was 16 and 17, I did have the idea that if bad things happen to me, it's just me. I can remember arguing with different people that they would say, but think about what that does to your mom. And it was about dying. She ain't dead. I'm dying. How ridiculous. God would say, what were you thinking there? And you have to say, I wasn't. Didn't know any better. I don't think that we're going to have this big to-do and big review of everything that we did that was wrong if the blood is there. And people wonder, why do y'all harp on water baptism? You're not getting blood on your doorpost without it. Revelation 1:5. And from Jesus Christ, who is the faithful witness and the first begotten of the dead and the prince of the kings of the earth, unto him that loved us, and he washed us from our sins in his own blood. Why would it say that? If it's not connected to Acts 22:16, wash away thy sins in his own blood, Colossians 1:14, in whom we have redemption through his blood, even the forgiveness of sins. Acts 2:38, how do you get remission of sins? You be baptized. Colossians 1:14, what's Colossians 2:12 going to say? That they were buried with him in baptism? Why y'all emphasize it so much? Because I am worried about you getting the blood on you. All these people in this community, they just don't get it. And they're just like the people we're talking about in the illustrations in the sermon. They say, what can I do about it? It was against my tradition. And then they'll say, what can I do about it? I didn't have enough time to study my Bible. That's why I'm trying to break through with people. You need to do it with the time that you got till you're out of time. Is the blood on you? Now look at this. The blood's on the door. Are you in the house? Then you're taken care of. 1 Timothy 3:15, the question then becomes, how do I get in the house? We just talked about how to do the blood. How to apply the blood, how do you get in the house? 1 Timothy 3:15, but if I tarry long, thou mayest know how thou oughtest to behave thyself in the house of God, which is the church of the living God, the pillar of the ground of the truth. Look at Acts 2:41-47. Then they that gladly received his word were baptized, and the same day there were added unto them about 3,000 souls, and the Lord added to the church. Who did he add? These people that were just baptized. Exodus 12, where did he say put the blood? On the doorpost. People in this world, what we need to communicate to them is, they're saying they've got the blood, but they didn't go in the house. That's not how Exodus 12 worked. Therefore, you can't make it apply in the New Testament. You got to be in the house where the blood is covering you. The church is the house of God. You enter the church by being baptized where the blood is put on you. Our closing slide. If you will do that, if you will have faith in Jesus, listen, you know you're going to make mistakes. One of the biggest things is backtracking. And we often don't want to do that. I don't want to look foolish. I don't want them to know that they were right. Forget all that stuff. You want to be in the blood, and you want to do the best for your circumstances. And if we will do that, this is what I really think it's going to look like. God's just going to say, I forgot all that stuff. We don't need to talk about that. Why would we? And he knows it, you know it. It was unpleasant. Let's not even review it. For I will be merciful to their unrighteousness, and their sins and their iniquities will I remember no more. Hebrews 8:12. You know how good that is? You get something, and you've been waiting a long time to get it. And you know what? It's exactly how you thought it would be. You aren't let down in the least bit. People had been waiting for this since Jeremiah 31. And people get it, and then they say, we aren't disappointed a bit. You know why somebody would be disappointed? It's not on God's end, it's our lack of faith. Y'all, do you know what? There are some people out there that would hate this lesson. They would hate the idea of people getting to make mistakes, go to heaven, and hear God say, forget about it. I did. They'd say, Caleb, you're just encouraging sin. I don't want you to sin. I don't want to sin. It would hurt you. It would hurt you. But I'm not going to start thinking of God as this evil person who just says, let me rub it in a little bit. He gave us His only Son that He would suffer in our place so that we can get the blessings. Now, if I really study my Bible and I see this hugely orchestrated plan, it's not hard for me to think that this is how my first interaction with God is going to be. Forgot all of it. Let's not talk about it. This morning, we are in the blood. The blood's on us. Are we helping other people come in contact with it? This is not the type of thing to help people understand supply and demand. Somebody asked a person one time, they said, would you like to have some beachfront property? And they said, yes, I would. And then they said, don't you know that beachfront property is limited in America? And they said, yeah, I do. And they said, that's why it's so expensive. You're not going to run out of blood from Jesus. It's not like me helping other people get it means some is taken away from me. Endless supply to cover everybody. So then when you say, well, it's not the idea that I feel like I can't share with people, then what is the problem? Why aren't we sharing with people? And we've got to be thinking about this too, that I need to be sharing with them the blessings that come with baptism. At some point they're going to get tired of us just talking about baptism. Right? Hey man, Ephesians 1:3 says all spiritual blessings in Christ. You don't have those. And they say, what are you talking about? You just go through a list of things that they don't have being a non-Christian. It's good. It's better than good. It's the best. We have access to it. The simple thing is, do you really believe that? Do you have the faith in that? That God's really going to take care of you? And that the first interaction will actually be pleasant? The Bible says, love, perfect love casts out fear. I shouldn't be afraid of God. Not like non-believers are. This morning I hope you're not. And I hope that we can share this with the community as we go throughout our life. And I hope and pray that you don't get discouraged as people just say, no thank you. You say, how are you saying no thank you to this? Give it to somebody else. But don't get discouraged. Let's think about all these points and how good it is going to be to see God when we finally do. Let's think about it as we stand and sing the song.